Action. Oh, good morning. I know Robin has recently had this training. This is the training that we do during new employee orientation. This is my first time to present this, though, in this group format. And I actually, after 20 months of working at Emerald Children's Home, finally took the previous PowerPoint from my predecessor and remade it and made it my own. So, 20 months, goals, I got it done.
Yeah, we understand.
There wasn't a time frame, you just got it done.
Yeah, 'cause the thing about her PowerPoint is it had her face right on the first slide. And I love Joanne to death, but so I put my face like on slide 4 or something. So anyway, I wish I could tell you today's topic was dynamic and fun and giggly. You're going to leave here, but it's compliance, y'all. It's a lot of rhetoric. It's a lot of rules. It's a lot of regs. That's what it is. But please feel free to ask questions. If I can't answer your question, Kristin might can answer your question, or I can always try to find out and get back to you.
You want me to have a back bend or the splits at intervals?
That would be fantastic.
That is definitely, let's go to that.
I got a problem.
Let's have medical staff on standby.
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to start passing it.
We might not need CPR.
So without further ado, let's get to boring you to death, okay? So compliance training, like I just said, it's all about rules and regs and standards and policies and yada, yada, yada. Kristin's gonna be my clicker for me. My next slide. By the way, I haven't created a full PowerPoint in a long time. So I played with the fades and the slide changes, so hope that's not too weird for y'all. But I actually had fun doing it. Yeah, I mean, it's very basic, but yeah. So the Emerald Children's Home, you've probably heard this a million times. We're a nonprofit organization known as a 501c3. Back in my early days, I had no idea what that meant. So if you do not know what a 501c3 organization is, I went ahead and put the little definition of it for you. So we're formed to carry out a charitable, religious, literary, education, or scientific purpose as recognized by the IRS. So I never really gave it much thought, but early in my career, I had no idea what a 501c3 was. I just knew I worked for one. So here next is our vision. Our vision at Emerald Children's Home is to inspire and promote generational change through children, which flows right into our mission to restore the identity of children so they can realize their great value and be a blessing to others. That mission statement is what drives everything we do at ACH. From our program that we currently use and run, to changes to that program, hiring, our board, everything is driven by that. And of course, at the center of that is Christ. Okay. Then of course, I just said that. It's our guiding declaration at our organization. Next slide. There's my face. When I created this slide though, PowerPoint created it for me, and my picture was that big. I'm like, oh, no, can't do that. So this gives you the actual regulation for a licensed child care administrator. And that is that it mandates a person may not serve as an administrator or a general residential operation, which is what we are, without a child care administrator's license. And currently at our facility, I am the holder of that licensed child care administrator's license. So on the next slide, this will share with you a little bit about the responsibilities of the child care administrator. This is directly from the state minimum standards. I just removed the weighted assignments to each one. So the child care administrator has has to have daily supervision and on-site administrative responsibility for the overall operation. That statement right there pretty much covers everything. Doesn't, no big deal. But luckily, I don't do what I do alone. I have a wonderful team: Kylie, Kayleen, Sarah, Kristin, and then the other parts of the team: John and Diane and Jeremy and Forbes and Diane Hill. Everybody. I don't have to do it alone because I couldn't.
Terry,
Yes,
if you weren't able to do your duties for some reason, would the operation not be able to continue?
That's a very good question, and we actually had to explore that possibility last March when I got so sick. Actually, the organization would be able to continue, at least on a temporary basis, while ACH was given the opportunity to hire another licensed child care administrator or get someone sent to take the test and become one. And we would do that through special permission from our licensing rep. And it's a variance process. You have to request a variance or a waiver with your license. But they would have to have someone. Now, when I had medical leave back in November, we weren't sure how long I'd be off. I took 2 weeks off for sure. All I had to do was notify our licensing person in advance, and then I had to designate who would act in my stead, even if they didn't have a license during that short time period. And so I did that, and those two people were John and John. Then when I came back, so there are ways that if I blip out of here tomorrow, the doors aren't going to close. And actually, they've written into some standards how long we have to hire an administrator. But you can always request a variance, so that's a blessing. And we're working on getting some backup administrators on board. We're just in that process. Yes, ma'am.
What does it require the class to become an administrator? What does that require? Is that?
I can give you a general idea, but to tell you exact specifics, I'd have to go read the standard. You have to have X amount of years of experience in the child care field, in an administrative capacity and supervisory capacity. At minimum, you have to hold a bachelor's degree. There's a certain amount of years experience you have to have. And of course, you have to be able to pass a licensing exam. So that's kind of the bare minimum.
Yeah. Okay.
Good question. A great question too, Ms. Debbie. So the administrator also ensures we comply with heightened monitoring, of which ACH is not on heightened monitoring. And at this very moment, we're not in danger of going on heightened monitoring. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that term. Are y'all familiar with that term?
Yes.
Okay.
We've pounded it into them pretty relentlessly over the last year or so.
Yeah, we do an excellent job here. Therefore, we're not on the heightened monitoring radar. Could that change? Yes. Have I worked for a facility on heightened monitoring? Yes. It is not fun. Not fun. If investigators and licensing now feel intrusive to you in your home, buckle up if heightened monitoring is involved, because you will have someone in your facility and in your home a minimum of once a week, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. So, but we're good. We do an excellent job, and we're going to keep on doing an excellent job, so I am not going to worry about it.
Interject super quick?
Sure.
Part of the reason that we were harping on that heightened monitoring over the last year or so is because Terry was mentioning that a lot of these agencies that got put on heightened monitoring had to do with med errors, medication things, that type of stuff. So that's why we really kind of bumped up, Terry and her team taking over, checking the meds and all that type of thing, because there were agencies put on heightened monitoring because of medication issues. And even though we have some medication issues at times, it's always corrected, it's documented in the folders, and we can go back and justify that because it's documented. This was stuff I believe it wasn't. Stuff that the administrators or the investigators would come in and there were not meds given, there was no documentation as to why, and I think nobody came back and signed anything. So it was just like they didn't give them, they didn't document it.
Medication issues have risen to the top of state scrutiny because of the federal lawsuit between the state of Texas. You probably heard the name Judge Janice Jack. That's one of the things that her team, her court monitors, is watching closely because of the trends that they found in other facilities. So we're just trying to be proactive rather than reactive. And let me just quickly take this forum to say, when it comes to med errors, excuse me, whether it's you forgot to give the dose, the child refused the dose, the kid dropped the pill, so now it's contaminated, or you just simply ran out of med and didn't get the refill called in soon enough, noting that mistake and documenting it in an incident report is really critical. But I know, as a direct care staff, if you come on duty and you flip open the med book and you see, Ms. Shander, that Debbie forgot to give a med and sign for it that morning, if you write a note and fill out an incident report, that may feel like you're tattling on her. But you're not. It's not how we look at it. It's not about getting anybody in trouble. Absolutely not. It's about CYA and just saying, hey, this is what happened. We've noted it. We're going to try to do different, better, move forward. So please know it's not about a gotcha. It's not about tattling on your coworker. I know it feels that way, but it's really not. Okay? If you have any questions about meds, how to document what's going on with the med, please, anyone on my team, Kayleen, Kylie, Kristin. Kristin's our med guru. You know, she does all of our medication training management. If we don't know the answer, we can find the answer. But please do not hesitate. You'll never be bothering us. There's no dumb question, and there's no dumb question when it comes to meds. Okay, even if it's just a over-the-counter cream. I mean, it doesn't all have to be psychotropic meds. So, any questions about that? So I just want y'all to feel like you're not tattling on a coworker, because I know that's how that can feel and look. It doesn't feel good. So on that number 3 bullet, responsible for other duties, overseeing staffing patterns, ensuring supervision, and provision of child care, ensuring the provision of planned flexible program activities, having a system in place where employees are able to manage emergencies, that's our on-call system, assigning caregivers that do not conflict or interfere with caregiver responsibilities. Now, y'all will notice right here, I don't do a lot of those directly. Diane, Jeremy, Emmett, others do those directly. But it all falls under the licensed child care administrator's licensure. And so therefore, technically, it's all under my oversight. I'm not all that in a box of chocolates. I can't do it alone, and I need help, and I have wonderful supports with our other administrative staff. So, administering and managing operation records according to our policies, ensuring the operation complies with rules of Chapter 42, blah, 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 blah. A lot of that's going to be law around finances, hiring practices, all that kind of jibber-jabber. And I defer that to Diane. Hallelujah forever. So also ensuring a child in care is not assigned or used as a caregiver. So, and then of course, ensuring that anyone whose behavior or health status is known to be a present danger to children and not allowing them at the operation. Any questions about those? Sounds like a lot of fun, huh? For the next slide, it actually talks about the GRO. We're a general residential operation. Y'all probably hear that term all the time, GRO. This means that we provide child care to 13 more children and young adults. And we are currently and have been licensed since I believe about 1985 for a capacity of 72 children. Now, back in that day, we might might could have had that many kids. In today's day and age, there is absolutely no way we would even dream of putting 72 kids on this campus. But right now, our preferred capacity is 56, so 8 children in 7 cottages, 8 times 7 is 56. Of course, we have 2 cottages closed. And then, of course, we take ages 5 to 17, levels of care, basic, moderate, and specialized. And we take referrals from St. Francis, which in our region, that's CPS. We take referrals from outside of our region, which is DFPS. We also take referrals from Taylor County Juvenile Probation and Potter County Juvenile Probation via contract. And then we also consider private placement requests. So that's just your average mom and dad calling looking for an out-of-home placement for whatever reason for their child. We prefer to do planned placements. If you've had an admission to your home, you know how involved that day is, especially if you get more than 1 kid on one day. So we prefer planned placements. We can do emergency placements, but we try not to because it's just so disruptive to the other kids and the home life. We want to prep the kids and we want to prep y'all. We just want to be able to plan that in advance. Plus, there's some significant paperwork deadlines that go with any new admission that Kylie and Kaylee have to really follow. So, next slide, Ms. Kristin. Child care services. This is just a definition from the standards, and that's services that meet a child's basic need for shelter, nutrition, clothing, nurture, socialization, interpersonal skills, care for personal health, hygiene, supervision, education, and service plan. That phrasing is actually in our policies and procedures often. No, y'all don't read the policies and procedures often, but I do. Our next slide was transitional living. We offer basic child care, general residential operation, and we offer a transitional living program. So the definition for a transitional living program is that it's for children 14 and up. In our program, we designate it 16 and up, although we've had some kids over at Pickens that are less than 16 because of necessity with staffing and changes in closing a cottage and opening a cottage. As long as they're 14 and up, they can be in our transitional living program. Our preference is 16 and up. And 14 and older, for whom the service of treatment goal is to learn basic life skills, development toward independent living. And transitional living program is very different than independent living program. Transitional living program is lots of teaching, preparing for living independently, and of course independent living is you on your own. Come by and say, hey, we go back and say, hey, but there's not a lot of support. We are a cottage home style here at Illinois Children's Home, and the minimum standards define that very specifically. So we are for children that are not receiving treatment services. Although you hear the word treatment in our environment, on Mondays we do treatment team meetings. Well, don't let that trip you up. That's just what we call them. We're not treatment. We're not licensed professional counselors. We're not nurses. We're not doctors. And we're not psychiatrists and psychologists, which all have to be involved in the actual treatment regulated program. And that's just what it says, pulling all our brains together. It's just what we call it. Each group of kids has to have separate living quarters, which they do. We have less than 12 children in our homes. The primary caregivers live in the child's living quarters, house parents in their apartments. And it's specific to 24 hours a day, at least 4 days a week, or 15 days a month. And that is a big part of what drives how our staffing schedule exists and is the way it is. And then we use other caregivers. So our daytime assistants, our overnight assistants, our PRN staff, all of those to meet the child's needs in an emergency or supplemental care, and we do have to get our house parents to come. So, I've heard me say the word minimum standards a lot. Can anybody tell me what minimum standards are? Yes, ma'am. And those come directly to us from Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. Printed, they're about that thick. And they change all the time. And no, I cannot quote them to you, although I can tell you what page the serious incident reporting requirements start on. It's page 67. That's if a child runs away, what do I do? If a child is beaten up by another child, what do I do? If a child's arrested, what do I do? Those start on page 67. I read them a lot, I reference to them a lot. Like I said, I am not the know-all, be-all, I'm not all that in a box of chocolates. I just read, and I reread, and I reread, and I think, and I discuss, and we plan. So our minimum standards, those are the rules that govern our facility. We're going to touch that. We have to ensure that we're in compliance with all of those rules and regulations. Now, there are things in minimum standards that don't pertain to us. There are things for treatment programs. There are things for emergency shelters or emergency care services, of which we do not do. There are things for a therapeutic camp. I'm trying to think what else. There's just a few things. And the stuff that does with treatment services, there's a lot of stuff around medical jibber jabber, nursing staff, chemical restraints of children, so that's using medication to subdue a child. Things that we don't deal with and we're not going to deal with here at ACH. This tells you that the minimum standards are weighted, they're given rank: high, medium, low, and low. That doesn't mean a lot to y'all. It's a big deal to us in the administrative roles, because if licensing comes in, tours your home, and finds us deficient in the minimum standard, and they give us a citation for that, that minimum standard has a weight to it. If it's a low-weighted standard, we still have to correct it, but it doesn't carry as much kapow with it as if it's a high standard. One example, if you've been here long enough, I don't know, well, Latasha and Shannon have been here long enough. A couple of years ago, we were being reviewed at Pickens Cottage, and the reviewers discovered we weren't putting an administration time on our med loss, the actual time. That standard is weighted high, and we had 24 hours, 48 hours to comply. 24 hours to comply. So where if it had been low, we'd have probably had 2 weeks to show compliance, but if it's high, we got 24 hours. So that's why your line for having children sign the med log went away, and now you put the time on your med log.
Which makes no sense to me.
Do what?
Which makes no sense to me. I think they'd rather have the initials to show that they did take the med over the time, or have all three. Your initials are initials at the time.
Yep, the child's signature and initials is not required whatsoever in minimum standards. I don't disagree with you at all, but you can only put so much on a stinking form. I mean, it kind of is what it is. But good point. Then, if you so desire, you're welcome to go read the minimum standards yourself. I'd welcome an appointment to chat with you about it. But anyway, residential child care licensing. You might hear or see that term regularly. Usually you'll hear CCL or RCCL. Licensing is part of Texas Department of Health and Human Services, and that is who licenses our facility. Without that license, we cannot operate in the state of Texas, period. Like I said, I think we've been licensed, with the current license we have since around 1985. So, We do have a new licensing representative. Our longtime representative, Tony McLaughlin, moved to a different department, and our new representative, just so you know her name is Carmen Joyner. She was here on March 6th and did some walkthroughs, her and a colleague. And some of you may have met her. But she's our primary licensing person. If I have questions, she's who I go to. But she also does our annual inspections. She'll do investigations. She's just who we go to for help and answers if we need them. So, RCCL regulates our operations to help us protect the health and safety of children in our care. Of course, they do our permitting, they do our monitoring. Depending on how your performance is over a period of time, so say over the last 3 years, we've had a total of 5 deficiencies. Over a 3-year period, that's really stinking good. But it also depends on how those standards were weighted, and that determines how often they monitor us or how often they come for a routine inspection and checkup. If you're getting lots of deficiencies all the time, constantly, and you're not fulfilling your corrective actions, or you do your corrective actions, but you keep having the same problems down the road, then they're going to start coming more often, until boom, you're on heightened monitoring. They do investigations. I think I mentioned that. Regarding violations of minimum standards. They keep parents and the public informed about childcare and how we comply with minimum standards. By the way, our compliance with minimum standards is something you can Google. It's public knowledge. And they also give us technical assistance. You'll hear me say TA on meeting licensing standards. That's their, they get a deficiency, but they really think we need to do something different. And they're strongly recommending we make a change. So, maintaining compliance. It's very important that the employees and our caregivers recognize 4 things about licensing to protect our children. Those are inspections, technical assistance, investigations, and then caregivers' rights and entitlements. And for inspections, it's for various things they look at. They look at all of it. They're responsible for looking at all of it. But, when Carmen comes on campus, she can't look at every single minimum standard. So they pick and choose. They're just coming for a routine annual visit. They'll come with a certain section of the minimum standards. They're looking for compliance. Now, if they're coming for an investigation, they'll be looking at whatever is pertinent to that particular investigation. So they also look at compliance with law, and then rules. There's another set of rules that govern us in addition to minimum standards, and it's called the 24-hour awake supervision rules, and then there's a supplemental addendum. Those are managed by our DFPS contracts person. It took me forever to get all these different divisions straight in my head. So I think I've got them now. So a deficiency or any failure to comply with a standard rule or law or a specific term of the permit or condition of evaluation, probation, or suspension. So they have the power to put us on probation. They have the power to revoke our permit. They have the power to suspend my license. They have the power to take my license. I do not, and I would encourage you not to live in fear of licensing or investigators. We have nothing to hide. I have nothing to hide. We're human. We may make mistakes. They may find some mistakes. But what we're going to do is learn and grow from it. So I don't panic, and I encourage you not to panic. You get a call from Kristin that says, "Hey, Miss Debbie, I'm coming over with an investigator in 5 minutes to your cottage." You don't have to go, "Oh my gosh, I gotta go clean."
Oh, that's what I did last time.
You don't have to. If your cottage isn't clean and they talk to us about it, we just put systems in place and move forward. It's not about that. So I had to learn years ago to not fear licensing investigations. Otherwise, I'd be twisted up all the time. I get twisted up over enough stuff all the time. I don't even worry about that. So you don't have to worry about that, sure. I mean, you want to be professional while they're there, sure. But you're welcome to ask them questions. But you just want to be professional. That's really all you need to do, and answer questions honestly. And then we just go from there. So during any inspection, if licensing staff find that we're not meeting minimum standards, rules, or laws, the areas of deficiency are discussed with appropriate operation employees and caregivers, and technical assistance and consultation on the problem areas is given. We are given the opportunity to discuss and disagree. And if we have concerns that we're not able to work out, then I can request what's called an administrative review. Back in whenever that deficiency we got for not having the time on our med logs, we had one inspector give us the deficiency and we complied and got it fixed. Right on the heels of that, we had a whole nother investigation going on, and that person also gave us a deficiency for the same thing. However, we had already corrected it from the time they inspected the cottage and months later finished their investigation. So it was a double jeopardy deficiency. I didn't like that, so I did an administrative review. And so we've been cited for it and we've corrected it, and now we're being cited for it again. All of those statistics go into what the state looks at on whether we're going to be in heightened monitoring. If you have one problem, that's one thing. You have it again, that's another thing. You have it again, you're starting to see a pattern and trends, and that's what the state looks at for putting you on heightened monitoring. So I use that process. It's really just paperwork, and then you have a phone call with a moderator who reads all the documentation, hears your side of the story as to why you think that deficiency we shouldn't have had that deficiency, and they make a ruling on it, and that's the final decision. And that particular one we won. They reversed that deficiency. So we don't have that second citation for no time on our med logs on our record. Any questions about inspections? I kind of already talked about technical assistance. Any questions about any of that? Moving right on. Investigations can be everything from a child running away, a child being admitted to the pavilion, a staff, I can't even think of an example for a staff. Maybe a staff getting a communicable disease. Back when COVID was reportable, COVID there for a while was reportable, which meant for child or staff. If it was a child, we had to report it to the hotline. If it was a staff, I had to report it to the hotline. They've now removed the COVID reporting requirement. Hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Oh, yeah, because we all went down together in 2021.
Yes, and in fact, with CDC, we've got our policy revision on my desk waiting for review by the administrative team, which updates our communicable disease policy because the CDC just recently removed the isolation timeline of 5 days from the protocol. You no longer have to isolate or quarantine for 5 days with COVID, and they've just put all of flu, COVID, and RSV into the same. Okay, so you still need to let your supervisor know, but you no longer are required to isolate for 5 days and miss 5 days work. When day 3 into it, you feel much better. But you do have to be symptom-free and fever-free for 24 hours without fever-reducing medications, just like you do with the flu, a cold, any of that. So they finally just moved COVID over to those standard illnesses that are here and gonna be here for a while to come. So be on the lookout for that updated policy. I've got it written, but I still need to throw it to the whole admin team for review and finalization, and then we'll email it out to the campus. So investigations is allegations for abuse and neglect, or we're not following the minimum standards correctly or satisfactorily, or we're not following a law or a rule. So they'll investigate, they notify us if we're not doing something right, and they give us a report. They have certain time frames for giving us those reports. I don't actually know what their time frames are. I think I can find them if I Google them. Most investigations, though, I think their timeline is 30 days. Sometimes they don't meet that timeline. I don't know what happens when they don't meet their timeline. I do know that our licensing people for over the last year have been being moved to the Dallas area on a regular basis to assist, because that area is kind of in need of higher supervision, and they were very short-staffed with their licensing. So under caregiver rights and entitlements, I already touched on, we can request waivers and variances, and that's just a matter of going into our, the state provides us with a login to the state provider portal. I go in there to that section, I click some buttons, I provide some explanations, and it submits directly to our licensing rep for review and determination if it will be granted. Since I've been here, there were only 2 variance requests showing in our history. And one was very old for when they were onboarding a new licensed child care administrator way back in 2007. And it was granted. The other was a draft variance waiver that was never submitted, and I can't even tell you what it was about, and I just deleted it 2 weeks ago. So it was very old as well. Okay, waivers and variances. If we're not able to comply with a standard for financial reasons, or we want to meet a standard in a different way than what the intent is of that standard, we can request variance waivers for those types of things. Off the top of my head, I was trying to think earlier if I could come up with an example of that. The only example I have is not for ACH, it's at my previous employer, where I was at an emergency shelter where children were only allowed to stay for a total of 90 days. If they needed to stay longer than 90 days, we could do a variance waiver request to allow them to stay 90 days, but we really had to justify the reason why. And the best example I could tell you about is I had a young man who was a senior in high school. It's April. He's coming up on his 90th day, but he is just a couple of weeks from graduating high school. And if he left at 90 days, he would have to leave Tascosa, go to a whole different high school, and try to change everything. So we did a request. Please, can he stay through high school graduation, which really extended him to about the 104-day mark. And we got approval. So he could graduate Tascosa High School and walk the stage, go to his ceremony, get his cap and gown, all of that. And then I got the pleasure of driving him to supervise him at WT. Or, I don't know what happened to him. I hope he's doing well. So that's just the best example I can think of right now. Of course, if we disagree, we do an administrative review. Some things you can do an appeal on. I've not come across those situations yet, luckily. So I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. So for caregivers, this is actually part of the definition of what the state considers caregivers, which is what y'all are. Whether your title is house parent or assistant or overnight staff, you're all considered caregivers. So a person counted in the child caregiver ratio whose duties include direct care, supervision, guidance, and protection of the child. And as a caregiver, you're responsible for knowing the child care services for each child that is assigned to you to supervise, being aware of and accountable for each child's ongoing activity, providing the level of supervision necessary to ensure each child's safety and well-being, including auditory and/or visual awareness of each child's ongoing activity as appropriate, and being able to intervene when necessary to ensure each child's safety. Who can tell me where you find the official documentation for what a child's level of supervision is?
Should be in their youth portfolio and extended reach.
Do you know where in their youth portfolio or extended reach?
Either page sheet or basement authorization.
Good try. Good try. It's actually in their plan of service,
Oh, okay.
which there should be a copy in the youth portfolio, their most current plan of service. Of course, you can always access that in extended reach. And between plans of service, if there's special supervision requirements or changes, Diane and Jeremy are responsible for noting those in extended reach under their step reviews. Okay. So Kayleen may write at this plan of service that Johnny Joe's supervision level right now is 2.2. But in a month, Jeremy's meeting with the team and the kid's doing great. We move his level to 3.3. So the most current review will be the step review. So you have to kind of look both places, especially for a child who's not a new admin, a child that's been here, of course. But those are the main things. And one thing I tell new hires when we're in new employee orientation is the importance of keeping new youth portfolios up to date and reading plans of service. I know plans of service, it's a ridiculous document. It is. I'll be the first to tell you, I think it's the stupidest document in the planet Earth. The way they have it formatted, just the wording on it, it is so much print on a page. It makes my head hurt, let alone a child reading it, and it's their plan. And we're required to give them a copy and review it with them. That's minimum standard. So it's a stupid form. But the state does hold us accountable for each of you following those level of supervisions. The supervision plan for a child. So read them. That's all I can tell you. Please read them. If you have questions, ask your home life supervisor, call Kayleen, Kylie, call me. We'll do whatever we need to do to help you understand what type of supervision you need to be providing for a child, which includes not only their actual physical supervision, but also their electronic supervision. Electronic supervision has become just as critical in this day and age as knowing actually their physical whereabouts. So, because there's so much harmful stuff out there in the electronic world that didn't used to be there. So please go ahead, read those plans of service. I know they're intimidating to get through, but it's critical because it's very, I won't say always, but it's very common. The majority of the time when an investigation is going on, they ask us for a copy of the incident report and a copy of the plan of service, and what they're looking for in the plan of service is their level of supervision. And we also send step reviews if there's been a change. Okay? So I just wanted to be very honest with y'all about that.
I pulled up extended reach just to show you where you can find the steps reviews. It's over on the compliance tab or in casework. There's step reviews right here.
It's not showing.
Oh,
That's weird.
All right, technical people. Drop it off.
Oh, Kristin don't know. I really don't know. Technology now.
As long as it does what it's supposed to do, I'm fine.
There you go.
okay. And On the compliance tab, step reviews right here, you can click on the most recent one. And this is gonna tell you the last review that was done on the step level. It's gonna tell you before the review, if there were any changes in their new level. So what Terry was saying is the plan of service may have been done 2 months ago, but a step review was done 2 weeks ago. So the step review is going to be the most accurate supervision level, and then the electronic level is in here also. So that's the supervision and electronic level that you need to go by, because there is that 3-month gap in between plans of services.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, this is just me making some assumptions. Now, Diane and Jeremy do team meetings with house parents weekly, usually weekly, and that's where most of those things are discussed. So as house parents, you really have the responsibility of making sure the other staff that work in your home, I guess you along with the home office supervisor, know if there's been any changes to a child's specific supervision level. Is that right, or is my assumption right?
Yeah, we don't cover it every week, we cover it about every couple of weeks, just to make sure that step levels are where they need to be.
More often than not, there's not a change, but if a child's had a big incident, there might be a change.
Well,
If they're coming off runaway, there is gonna be a change.
Well, and if something happens where, for whatever reason, like especially during summer, things like that, if we can't meet with the house parents, at least on my end, I'll at least, when I find out I can't meet with them, if they have appointments or whatever, I'll at least text them and confirm their current step levels, just to make sure nothing's changed. If they need to, if they're interested in moving step levels up, we'll talk about it over text or whatever, email, and then we'll get it corrected.
Yeah, the big events that affect like immediate supervision plans, if they're coming off runaway or they recently run away and they've come back, they've been to the psychiatric hospital and they've come back. Those are the two biggest things, and both of those require safety plans, which is going to be a very specific supervision level, which you will also have access to or be told about and posted in your office. Thanks for showing us that much, Kristin. Any questions about caregiver responsibilities? I mean, those are pretty broad. Like a lot of stuff can fall into those, and so y'all have big responsibilities, and we know that. And y'all are superstars, rock stars. You do an excellent job. All right, next slide, Miss Kristin. Okay.
Just kidding.
Exciting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna say, and it also helps if you have level of care and supervision and all that, you don't flip in your head. Because I was like, they were facing, modern, all that, that's what I was saying, when I answered your question, so, sorry about that.
Yes. Now, there was a time 8-10 years ago where you had to define whether a child was on low, moderate, or high level of supervision, which is different than their level of care, which determines what we're reimbursed daily for a child. But that's not anything we do anymore. And just drop a little bump. You probably have already heard, but the state is revising their reimbursement program. It's going to be a big change, and it should go into effect by 2027. So the level of care system is going away. What they're looking at doing is service packages. So we will contract with the state or St. Francis to provide certain types of services for each child, and the reimbursement rates are going to be the same for every child on our campus, because we'll have, well, we're still trying to determine. There may be some slight variances if we have an add-on package, but it's not going to be Johnny Joe us getting paid $45 a day and Billy Bob us getting paid $220 a day. Most of the kids will be in a very similar price range, and that's looking like it's going to be in the $200-something range a day. So good news, we might can do more for our kids.
I was gonna say, we'll be able to provide services.
Absolutely, we will, and I believe we fully intend to. So, That's coming down the pipe. Y'all don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about the billing anyway. But Forbes is leading the charge with that and participating in the meetings, as am I and John Emmett. I kind of go cross-eyed when you start talking numbers to me. Although I think Emmett does a great job with it, and I know Forbes does. So you'll be hearing more about that coming down the road, but it's not anything that's going to happen in the next 6 months. Some movement will start happening probably in early 2025. So not too far, but still.
So we did experience that once again with guinea pigs, right?
And actually, the current level care system has been in place for 40 years. I didn't realize it was that old. From I've read what they were at before they went to this current level care system, but now this level care system is 40 years old with very little modification, although they have changed the reimbursement. But it's time for it to go. But change is hard. So, when you're trying to decide how close to supervise a child, you take into account their age, their differences in abilities, indoor and outdoor layouts, surrounding circumstances, hazards, risks. You might supervise a child differently at the mall than you would out at MediPark, than you would out on our courts. You take all of that into account. And the child's physical, mental, emotional, and social needs. If the child's 8 and you're at MediPark, you're going to probably supervise them a little differently than a 17-year-old at MediPark. And that's appropriate. That's appropriate. Any questions about that? No, caregivers must. This is directly from minimum standards. You do a quick overview, just 10 minutes of stuff. Okay. These are directly from minimum standards, and if investigations or licensing is looking at whether or not we're appropriately supervising a child, these are some of the go-to standards they look at. Okay. So be aware of the child's habits, interests, special needs, and special supervision. Make sure we're providing a safe environment. We're cultivating developmentally appropriate independence in children through planned but flexible program activities, positive reinforcement for a child's efforts and accomplishments, ensure continuity of care for children by sharing with incoming caregivers info about child's activities during the previous shift and any verbal or written information or instructions given by the parents or other professionals, as that's your changeover interactions. That may be changeover notes, that may be a face-to-face at changeover time, that may be text or phone call, but that transfer between shifts is very important. And I will add, reading your emails. If you're off duty for 2 days, when you come back on, you still have to read the emails that came in from those 2 days, because there might be something in there you need to know. Okay. Hopefully, the staff that cover while you're off aren't deleting your emails or moving your emails. But if we have those individual situations, be sure to let your homeline supervisor know, and we'll work for a solution. Okay. So those changeover, I always say changeover notes, but it can be verbal, face-to-face, written, text, phone call. And actually, Diane helped me get a better picture of that yesterday. I thought it was always face-to-face, but sometimes it's face-to-face here in our environment, sometimes it's not, it's those other things. So, and that's okay, as long as it's happening. And then, of course, implement and follow the child service plan, and that's where they get us for level of supervision. So, off the top of your head, you remember what page supervision level is on? It's like
about halfway
It's like page 12 or 10. It's not in the first part of the document where you think it would be, because that form is ridiculous. Okay, next slide, Ms. Kristin. All right. Okay, participating in unsupervised childhood activities. Well, we need to know where the child is. So maybe they're going on a school choir trip. Maybe they're on level 4 and can walk to Dollar Tree. And there's all kinds of special things. Maybe they're just at work, or they work close enough they're walking to work. Okay? So you want to know where the child will be. You want to give the child a time to return. You want to arrange or provide or confirm transportation for them, or are they approved to walk? Are they walking? Give a child a way to contact a caregiver in an emergency. Those kids that are on those higher levels that actually do things out of our supervision, you can make sure they have a phone number to the cottage. They have a phone number to you if you're the one on duty. Those kinds of things. It's always better to call me on my cell than call my office landline. Because I may not be in there, but I always have my cell. I don't know if y'all are the same way. But when I've been in the home, I don't always hear that cottage landline ring in the office with the door closed. Do y'all have problems with that too?
Well, they have cordless phones that generally.
Do you carry the cordless phone around with you when you're out?
No, we'll put it in the living room. The thing is with the phone, we don't answer the cottage phone too much because it's 10, 15 scam calls a day. I mean, we would answer the phone all the time.
Okay.
And I talked to Jeremy about, can I change my phone number? Because I'll cut somebody out. And he said we have to change all the phone numbers because Tiffany and everybody's getting, y'all getting scam calls like every few minutes the phone rings. But when it's another cottage, it's a shorter ring. Because we've got kids from Pickens calling their brother.
It's a different ring when it's cottage to
And I'm
cottage.
learning to listen for that, but generally speaking, we get 8, 10, more than that scam call. You know, it's according to like, hello, can you hear me? I want you to say yes.
When I first started, I tried using the landlines more, just out of respect for people's personal cell phone. But I have found it's just easier to call people's cell phones. You usually get them a lot quicker, or text. Some people prefer texting over talking. I prefer texting over talking, but you're always welcome to call me. My phone rings all the time, landline and personal, because my landline phone number is what's on record for the state of Texas, as is my name and my email. So, yeah, no big deal, no pressure. It's just all there. And my cell phone is on record as well because it's tagged with my license. So, don't you want your license, Chelsea?
Right now.
But keep in mind that on your medical consenters, on your education decision maker, in Skyward, workers have the number to the cottage. Like your cottage is listed on almost everything.
We do not give them your personal cell numbers.
So if
That's
somebody's
not our
trying to
right.
get in touch with you, they're gonna try your cottage first. Superior, that's just their first.
If they get your personal cell number, then you need to give it to them.
Okay.
Because we're not going to give it to them. Yeah, we're not going to, Superior's not going to call Kristin and she goes, let me give you Robin's personal cell.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But
We don't pay for your cell. If we paid for your cell, we could, but we don't, as
Yeah.
far as I know.
But if they call me and say I've left 3 messages, I'm gonna give your cell number.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's that, but we don't typically, we're not going to give your cell number out get-go. Now, if an investigator calls or a licensing person calls and they're having trouble connecting with you for whatever reason, maybe you're on vacation, maybe you're sick, maybe you just aren't getting the messages and have time to return call, then I will give an investigator or licensing person your personal cell number because that's critical to our operation and they need to be able to move on with whatever they're investigating. So, and that will even happen if you're on maternity leave, extended medical leave. Something happened while you were on duty, but now you're off duty for medical leave and they're investigating it. You might get a call from an investigator. Hopefully not.
Might be a bad day.
But like I said, you don't have anything to fear. Just be honest. Just be honest. So that covers that slide. So are y'all bored to death yet? I know I am.
It is a song.
You do it all the time.
I think
You
it's-
do it all the time.
You sing this song.
No, I said it is at song, so it works.
Myself and my staff, we can sleep. all the time.
Okay, y'all are gonna give me a complex. Those are my 2 classes. I'll go hide in my office.
You're doing the splits, and I'll be back then.
If it helps anybody feel better about sauna, I've been going through sauna for almost 20 years now. And I still freeze during the nonverbal part. And we only train the short personal restraint. Boys Ranch, they trained it all. My last employer, the emergency shelter, we trained it all and used it all those restraints and interventions. But I still freeze, even though I know it like the back of my hand. And I can't remember moves and the release hold and that. And Jeremy's like, come on, Terry, just get through it.
I have never one time told you.
I know, that's how I feel. So I'm like, well, after 20 years, I should be a trainer. But it's just not my forte. And I know the verbal, no sweat. But in class, I trip up on it. I don't know, maybe I have performance anxiety. But I do know it. So, which y'all probably do too. Child care ratios, lovely topic. You probably already know our ratio is 1 to 8. That's during waking hours. So typical time to be awake, waking hours. So that's 1 adult to 8 children. Children under the age of 5 count as 2. And since we don't take children under the age of 5, the only way this comes into play is if house parents have young children of their own, which is totally fine. But when we're looking at the census for Thompson Cottage, we've got to consider bringing them into the mix. Because when you're on duty, your daughter's with you. And that's totally fine. It just gives you a scenario up there. If you had a group of kids where one is younger than 5, and how to do your counts. Now, during sleeping hours, nighttime hours, the ratio changes significantly, actually. So, when I was at the emergency shelter, it was 1 to 15. But for us, we're not treatment services, so actually it's 1 to 24, but you're never going to have 24 kids in your cottage. But they're also not going to let us rotate you around to different cottages either. They want 1 awake caregiver in every establishment. So. But y'all are very familiar with, we have night staff that's out for some reason, they're sick, we're short staffed. Sometimes we have to move kids to other cottages, but even still, we don't exceed the ratio. So we're pretty fortunate there. We don't have to worry about that. Anything to add about that, John?
You can be temporarily out of ratio for transport and things like that.
You can be. I didn't put that in this training. You can be. Really, it's.
Like if you got, let's say your test goes to a van full of 8 kids, you're by yourself picking them up, and someone's like, oh my gosh, I forgot to pick up so-and-so, or whatever. You could say, yes, you gotta walk home. You could say, yeah, come over here and get them. You shouldn't have forgot it. Or you could say, yes, I can be temporarily out of ratio during transport. Now, if you remain in ratio once you get back to campus and things like that, then that's where we get into issues. You would just need to consider some of the things that we talked about, just child safety, being aware of the kids and kids' needs and that kind of thing. So you can be temporarily out of ratio.
Would we call a phone call or whoever our supervisor is to let them know that we should be temporarily ratio transport?
Yeah, I would always cover, just make sure somebody besides you knows that, because sometimes that's hey, we gotta follow up with somebody and let them know, set an alarm, pick up your children, or if it's a constant issue, you really want to problem solve it a little bit.
Typically during business hours, it's going to be your home life supervisor. Typically,
Or schedule people.
if you know they're on vacation though, you can call Emmett, call me. We'll get it where it needs to go, and if you need help, we'll figure it out. Okay. Of course, if it's after hours, on call. And if I don't know what to do about it, I call in bigger brains. I call in bigger brains to help. All right, background checks. since y'all are already all hired and onboarded, this is super stuff. You know, you each had to go through a background check, you had to fill out a form, you had to give us a copy of your social security card, your driver's license, and that form went to somebody up here at admin. Well, it went to me or to Tiffany. Tiffany helps me enter background checks. And then you go through that process. You got an email that says you need to have your fingerprints done. Or you got an email that said eligible to be at the operation. After you get your fingerprint email, you go and get your fingerprints, then you get a notice that says, hey, you're eligible. I get those notices too. And that's how we know we can go to the next step in hiring. But they're looking at that one central background check unit that we access through our provider portal. Checks FBI, it checks sexual abuse registries, it checks other states, or has you jump through additional hoops to check other states, especially if you've lived out of the state of Texas anytime in the last 5 years. Background checks has really evolved in the last 10 years. It's much more involved and complicated now than it ever used to be. And quite frankly, it stalls us a lot. So if you're a recent hire, you know everything y'all had to jump through coming from Missouri is a lot, huh? But you held with us, you hung in, we got you.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
And it's different for state route too, so that would even more so back up your timeframe than ours.
Yeah, different states handle it differently. So if you've lived in, say I'm hiring you, you've lived in Missouri, Maryland, and Oregon in the last 5 years, I'm gonna submit all that, and our background check unit's gonna send you an email that tells you specifically what you have to do to submit your background checks to each of those states. Mm-hmm. Some of those states, like California, says, we're not playing that game, don't send us anything, we're not doing it. Well, that's easy. Other states, say Maryland, we accept no electronic anything. Don't fax us, don't call us, don't email us. Has to be this paper copy filled out this way in blue or black ink and snail mailed to us. Uh-huh. And we could take up to 8 weeks to give you an answer.
Right.
Other states, it's an email to their background check people. Click, 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 2 days, click, 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 done. It's different by state.
So basically, you know, state.
Well, we had multiple different states, and I think it was Mississippi that said, okay, now, fine, after waiting a week, then it'll be 3 more weeks, and each one of them, you have to make sure that you reply to everything,
It's very specific details, and I've seen a few of them. Even we'll get into that, our volunteers and our mentors, they have to go through background checks as well. And if we have like an older individual who's going through that process, those background check emails can be very confusing to them. And I was assisting a gentleman through that process for a while back. He just wasn't understanding the language in the email he got. So he forwarded it to me, and that was really the first one I had ever seen. Because the emails that I get are different than the emails you get. Okay? And they will not tell me what's on your email. That's highly confidential, HIPAA protected information. I can ask you, and you can tell me no, I'm not telling you. Or you can choose to disclose that. But otherwise, my information I get is not the information you get. And the background check unit will not tell me what they told you to do. They in fact say, won't talk to you. We'll just send you the end results. Or an occasional update. So it's kind of a pain, but it is what it is. Next slide. Oh, background checks with you. We've really already talked about the sex registries, the out of state. They're just looking to see if you have criminal history, abuse, neglect history. Are you a risk to the health and safety of children? That's what that mechanism is for. That's what they're also looking for when we're doing more, your reference checks and verifying your previous employment. They're determining whether you're a risk or not, for the health and safety of children. Next slide. We're almost done, y'all. Visitors. I'm gonna go ahead and give everybody a copy. Please take it with you of our current visitors policy. I've got portions of it up here on the slide. We don't have a good feel for how often the homes deal with visitors, mentors, volunteers. Although I know our new board is getting a swing of putting other assigned colleges and that kind of thing. And we also have mentors, some that are already established working with certain kids, some that we're just getting rolling. John Emmett's kind of spearheading that a bit. But the other component of this is if you're a house parent that lived in our cottage, your visitors to you on this campus, whether you're on duty or off, have to be background checked if they visit a certain amount of times a month, or what their level of, how often they're here. If they live with you and they're over the age of 14, they have to go through background check process, have TB tests. If you have an adult daughter who's coming to have dinner with their mom and bring the grandkids twice a month on a Sunday, we're probably good. Don't need to do anything, But if you have Johnny Joe from our board of directors who's coming once a week to mentor little Timmy Bob in math, well, we're going to have to jump through some more hoops, and that's all specified by Texas Administrative Code, so that's law and minimum standards. And all of that is spelled out in detail in that policy I just gave you. This policy is in our personnel policies and procedures, which you can access in the shared drive. You can always get a hold of Diane Hill or myself. We'll be happy to share it with you. Just run through this real quickly.
Terry,
Yes.
we do have, TCM, we have caseworker come to the house, they always go to the kids' room, because they want to see their room, that's part of their requirements, I get that. But, we've also had, TCM and, situations like that, where they come and they go hang out in the kids' room because that's their area, or a private area for them to have their session, so I do
will
need
say that
clarification on that.
TCMs is preferable they not be in the bedrooms.
So that's where
That's
I
why we
have
have-
been allowing it.
that's
And
why we
then
have
when they're
research.
coming to the cottage on like a Saturday or late evening, so there isn't any other place to do it except for outside or in the
Is
cottage.
that happening? So I know that.
That's happening with, yeah,
Currently?
yes.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so here's what we'll do. That's not a role we need to put you in.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you letting us know, and we'll redirect that.
Okay,
It might be best on occasion that happens, especially if there's a special circumstance. But in general, no, that's not.
Yeah, we had it happen with TCM in the past and some therapists in the past, and we had to redirect that.
Yeah,
We'll
it's-
take care of
okay.
Yeah, I mean, we put in therapy rooms
it.
after.
Caseworkers are 100% different.
Caseworker, CASA, and
Yeah.
TCM, that's where I need the clarification.
Caseworkers are like,
Caseworkers
that's
I
part
know.
of their child right is
Got
that they will have private conversations with their caseworkers. So that's why they will go down and things like that. And so that is it's a different situation. CASA, there is not, we're not going to provide every CASA worker a key to go over there and visit. And it's a different frequency than maybe weekly TCM and things like that.
Mhm.
So.
The CASA's, yeah, CASA has to be able to have private conversations, so.
Right. CASA will be on the same page as a caseworker.
Okay,
And so just,
other than, yeah, and you'll take care of that.
CASA workers are fully background checked and
There is
vetted.
no other place for them to have any private interaction.
Yeah.
So
So
I just,
just FYI, of course, permanency specialists are background checked and vetted. So are CASAs, and so are TCMs. They all have to go through that process as well. But thank you that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. All right. Let's see. So this next slide is about guests who visit the residences in areas where our kids are frequently present, such as playground play areas, that kind of thing. Because we're licensed, we're held accountable for the care and supervision of children, and visitors, under most circumstances, are not left alone with to supervise or discipline children in our care. That does not include TCM causes and permanency specialists. This is Johnny Jello calling the mentor for his child in your cottage. This is a board member wanting to be a volunteer at your cottage X amount of times a month. That kind of scenario. In some limited cases, visitors who have been trained, cleared through background checks, and approved by authorized staff may work with children in a limited duration without the presence of ACH staff. But there's cases and processes for approval, and all of those are spelled out in detail in that policy. The main thing is if we're trusting that individual to be completely alone with our child for a period of time and transport that child, so it goes through multiple steps for checks, trainings, and it also requires John Thomas. He's the final say-so. Okay. I already mentioned it. Current regulations stipulate 14 years or older, even if they're not being provided care, but they live on our campus. So Emmett lives this situation every day. His youngest child turned 14 last summer. So now he's in the background check system. Came back really quick though. No problem. I had to call Chelsea recently and ask what Dorian's age was, because he looks much older than he is. I thought he was 12-ish, and he is 12, right? So, but she gave me his birthday. Yeah. She gave me his birthday, and I have it written down, so I'm tracking it. When he gets ready for 14, I'll hit y'all up for a social security number. We'll get him entered. So that's really for me to track, but you can always email me and say, hey, Dorian's about to turn 14, Terry, do we need to get background checking? I'd welcome that help. So those are just the requirements for prospective to live in an adoptive or foster operation, having unsupervised access, or regularly or frequently staying or working at our operation. And if we're having an accountant child caregiver ratio, which I don't know that we'll ever have a mentor or volunteer accountant child caregiver ratio. I don't know of any scenarios where we've done that. I don't know of any discussions on the table about doing that. Having a volunteer or mentor count in child care.
No, because they have to have a totally different level of training in order
Yes.
to count the ratio.
Yes, and so we're not gonna do that. Not gonna do that, that's just the liability risk, that's just risk management. I pulled from the visitors policy this frequency of visits to campus, and there's 3 levels, and these are directly from Texas Administrative Code, so that's law. I'm not gonna go through every one of them, that's why I wanted to give you a copy of the policy. But this is very specific, and it's really on administration to help you navigate that if you're in one of the scenarios or dealing with one of the scenarios that requires these checks. Bobby Debbie, I know y'all navigated this when you were new, so your adult children would visit frequently, which was fine, totally fine, great. You've done it, yeah, Robin's done it with her son, and I think her daughter's in the process.
Yeah, I think hers came back here recently, and then it's like, when are you gonna show up?
I haven't checked email this morning, as of yesterday, I didn't have anything.
Oh, okay.
Has she done her fingerprints?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do them within 30 days, it cancels you out of the system.
Oh, okay.
So, anyway, so I'm not gonna go through each one of these, but, it would be your home life supervisor or John Emmett primarily that would help you navigate which of these are applicable to you and what you need to have your loved one do. Because you're not gonna be the one responsible for getting a volunteer or a mentor through this process, that's gonna fall to either myself, Jeremy or Diane, or John. Primarily right now, it's John who's bearing that burden, so. Next page, this actually gives you, the administrative code, if you so wanna look it up. And then last but not least, the very last slide, I like how that slide played out.
That is kind of neat.
Brilliant. Any visitor on campus, whether an adult or child, must not distract or disrupt the primary responsibilities of our staff caring for ACH children. For ACH staff on duty, their primary responsibility is the care of ACH youth. And I will put a caveat with this. Every great so often, we have an investigator or a licensing person come who maybe is new or new to us, doesn't know us. And maybe they're kind of being a ding dong and they're in your cottage, you're supervising kids, and they start firing questions at you or want you to show them this or this or this. Let's say you're single staff. That may be creating a supervision situation for you that you need to get on-call involved in or your supervisor quick. So we need to get somebody over there to help you so we can answer their questions or just, figure out what needs to happen.
I would add, if they're not walked over by somebody, they just show up at your door, don't assume you know, because that's their right, they can walk in at any time, but we also would like to know if they're here, and why they're here, what they're doing, that kind of thing. So contact supervisor, Carrie, myself, and the on-call staff, and let us know if they did walk over just unnecessarily.
And that would happen after hours. They come after 5, they come on a weekend, they come on a holiday. They typically don't come on holidays unless it's an abuse and neglect call that's called in as priority.
Read the window on late night, overnight, licensing person.
Yeah.
Knocks on your door,
His name is Kenneth. He is actually part of that court and monitor system, the 24-hour wait staff regs. And he has to come once a month, random times, to make sure our staff are awake, not asleep. And y'all are always awake. Fantastic. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Sometimes if you work night, you're a special person. I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm old and I'm gripey and I'm crotchety and I can't do that. But if it works for you, I'm truly grateful for you and your talents. So we've got several night staff in here. So, and I think some of y'all are Chelsea covered a night for us the other day. You may have pulled one recently too, Josh. I don't know. But very grateful for all of our staff. But yeah, if you do run into a situation where someone official is pulling you away from supervising and caring for your children and your charge right now, please just call. Don't be ugly to them. Don't be unprofessional. But you can say, hey, could you give me a minute to call my supervisor because I feel like I'm not being able to meet my kids' needs while I'm talking to you. Give me just a minute. Let me get some help, and then we can go from there. That's all you gotta do. Just be professional. If there's anybody going to be ugly to a licensing person, it's going to be me. But I try real hard not to, because you get more bees with sugar than you do with vinegar. I learned that a long time ago. But I'm kind of crotchety and snappy. Occasionally I fly off the handle. But I try to do good. I try. All right, your torture has ended. Any questions whatsoever? There's no such thing as a dumb question. Mr. Emmett, Jeremy, do y'all have anything you need to touch base on? You want to add?
I think
subtract?
I don't know the right way to touch base on it. Hotline reporting is, when Terry talks about those things that they look at seriously, is one of the things that's very serious with hotline reporting is not just did you report something, but the timeliness of the reporting. So, for instance, one one of the areas of hotline reporting, whether it's runaway, something like runaway, or something like abuse, neglect, that kind of thing, the standard is for timeliness or when we should report it as soon as possible. For example, with abuse and neglect, as soon as possible once you secure the child's safety. So that's pretty much the right away. So, and then the big question is, well, the child tells me that they were abused in one form or another 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, 2 months ago, whatever. How do I know if this has already been reported or not? You can ask the child if they've called somebody before in the past, but I would never just sit on that information yourself, right? That's if the child reports to you abuse, neglect, or something like that, please just go ahead and make zero assumptions and call your supervisor on call right away and allow them to get involved and guide and direct you on that, right? So child reports abuse, neglect, don't sit there and judge whether or not it should be reported. You report it up to your supervisor for on call and allow them to guide and direct you. Okay. One other note with abuse and neglect is we can get in trouble from licensing if we do any investigation on it, but we have to do enough to get information to make a report. So that's basically what went. So what happened, where was it, when did it happen, who was involved, who else have you told, who knows? Okay, good, that's enough. And you can let on-call or your supervisor handle those questions. We'll take care of that. Just let us know so that we can meet those reporting timelines, deadlines.
Yeah, and I know some of the staff who may not have it, like our newer staff with the runaways, they usually have us wait to talk to the police first, because they'll ask for the incident number sometimes. That way you can report it to the hotline, so usually they would even wait until you at least talk to the police before you report it to the hotline.
That's typically how that process goes. Runaway, you call on call, you call police, then you call hotline.
Yeah.
And go from there. That's the typical flow. Every now and then it happens differently, but that is the typical flow.
Right away, you have a little bit longer time frame, unless, does anybody know?
They're under a certain age.
Yeah, under certain age, we call law enforcement right
For special
away.
needs,
12, huh?
for special needs, right?
Yeah, so 12, so what we go by is 12 or mental age of 12 and less, or mental age of 12 and less. I would even say, like, if you got kiddos that are snatchable sizes, like a Dayton, I mean, that's something you may want to report right away as well. So the other reason for doing an on-call, or excuse me, a hotline report right away is if the child is known to have been involved in sex trafficking or suspected to have been involved in sex trafficking. They want that info.
There's one more caveat, and that's if you suspect that they have no plans to return to the operation.
True.
So there's even another caveat in that standard that all comes in to play. So yeah, I just thought of something, and I think this is probably something I need to do better when I'm on call, is if you call me and say, so-and-so ran away 3 minutes ago, and I'm like, okay, do they have, I have to run through a list. Do they have CS, child history being trafficked, sexual abuse, aggression, what are their ages, what's their developmental level, all that. I'm going to ask you questions about that. And I may say, yes, I need you to go ahead and do an incident report this to the police and the hotline. But if I don't tell you a time frame in which you have to do all of those, and you're feeling maybe a college is full with 8 kids, and although you've got one run away, you've got 7 others blowing up. If I don't tell you a time frame in which to report those, ask. I should be sure and tell you, because I need you to report that ASAP, or you can wait 2 hours before you do your incident report. But you will always need to do your incident report before you leave shift. Not the next morning, before you leave your shift. Please, please, please. Because we also have regulations around when we have to report it to the permanency specialist or the managing conservator. And so not only did we become deficient in one set of standards, we then become deficient in another set of standards, which y'all don't even deal with. It has to do with Kylie and Kaylee and Kristin. So just something to keep in mind. But feel free to ask on call, how long do I have to report? You can say, what's my deadline? Most of the time, though, y'all do an excellent job. You get to it right away. It's just harder if you're single-staffed and maybe you have other kids with other issues. You might have to ask for help. We might have to figure something out, but that's what we're here for. Any other questions? Y'all asked some great questions today. I really appreciate that. All right, well, we are done, y'all.
Yeah, she said she didn't. I thought she was completely done. So it's for Wednesday, for her work schedule.